Welcome to Inside Missions, a production of Maranatha Volunteers International, offering an in-depth look at the people, the cultures, and the countries where Maranatha is working. I'm Dustin Comm, and today we have someone who's served at different levels of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in South America before transitioning to a missions organization in Maranatha, and that is our Vice President of Volunteers, Lisandro Staut. Lisandro, welcome to Inside Missions.
Thank you. Very good to be here with you, Dustin. Inside Missions has inspired me, and I hope to have something to share here.
I think you will. Tell us just a little bit about you growing up. Growing up, did you ever expect yourself to be working for a missions organization, let alone a construction missions organization?
No, probably not. You may notice on my heavy accent, I come from Brazil. Brazil has a very active Seventh-day Adventist Church. I was born in a Christian family, a Seventh-day Adventist family. And Brazil has now the largest Adventist population. It's the country with more Adventists in the world, 1.7 million members in the church there. But that's not part of our culture, right? Serving as volunteers, especially overseas. The church members are very active where they live, very active with their churches, very engaged with the church mission locally. Now, more recently, I would say for the last decade or so, the church has promoted more. The church in South America has sent missionaries to other parts of the globe to serve, but also the church is promoting short-term missions, which is what we do here, right? But that was not my reality, growing up in South America, serving in mission trips, etc. As a kid, going to school, etc., I was not even planning to serve the church initially. Although, coming from the church, having a family that had served the church there in South America, I initially was not. I had probably, plans that would be, working with things that are completely different. And to the very end of my high school years, when things changed, based on an invitation that I received, someone that was recruiting for the university, they inviting students to come to the Adventist University in São Paulo for, one of the programs that they had there. Theology, communication was a new program that they had there. And I thought that I had something to do with that. So I went to school to become a pastor and a journalist. That's what I am. I graduated in the school there in Brazil as a journalist. So yeah, my upbringing was never related to missions or short-term missions as we do here.
And that was sort of a surprise to a lot of people in your life, right? To pursue theology, pursue journalism. You told me earlier that you were sort of a jokester when you were younger and maybe got in trouble here and there, and so your path was not necessarily set towards becoming a pastor or anything like that.
Oh, yes. I became, because of the circumstances that we had at home, some Christian homes, they are not perfect, right? A few are.
A lot,
right? Yeah. Mine was not. And so the way I was reacting to that, especially my teenager years, right? The way I was reacting to that was trying to bring attention in the school. So I was not a bad kid in the sense of was not damaging other people's property or involving with violence or anything. But I was a trouble kid, right? So when I was in the academy, I was in the boarding school for 4 years before going to college. And the second year, the principal had to send me home because I was just giving too much trouble. So yeah, in a sense, I was a trouble kid. And then when I decided to go to the seminary, it was at the very end of my high school years. People were very surprised. They may be surprised now if they know that I not only went through that route, but now I am helping other trouble kids, to serve God in other places. And that's something that brings me joy, to think about that and how God has led me, through this path of serving the church and now serving the church in a different way through Maranatha.
You said your mom was even surprised when she found out.
She didn't know when I decided to to go to the seminary, I had to go through a process. There in Brazil, we have a comprehensive exam that you need to do, and there's other steps. I need a recommendation letter from the board of my local church, etc. My mom didn't know that I was going through that process. She knew that I was considering at that point going to the Adventist University. And she didn't know about the seminary, and I was applying for a double major that we had at that time there to go to the School of Journalism and the seminary at the same time. And she was surprised. At some point, she decided to call the university to know why my name was not listed in my second option, and they told her that I actually had applied for the seminary, and she was very surprised. I believe that as some of my teachers, she's surprised to this day.
So you make this decision to pursue theology and journalism. It required a recommendation be filled out, and you told me that there was a moment in which you realized, you know what, I can be someone who maybe people have said that I am not, or that maybe I didn't believe that in my heart I was, but I can be someone new. I can go in a new direction. Yeah,
I remember, the part of the process for me to get to the seminary, I had to get this letter from the board of my church, and the Pastor Paulo, he was not able to gather the board together, to prepare that, I guess, and he sent to the deans or the dormitory, right? So those pastors and those leaders who were actually dealing with me every day there in the dormitory, every night and every day, and they were not very excited with my request. So the form that they had to fill, there's several areas that they need to answer, about my behavior as a student and with other people, and it was actually mainly negative. And I decided, well, at that point, I could possibly go back to other people, people that would like me more, and go back to say, get me another recommendation. And I decided to test God in that, right? I decided, well, I'm going to apply with this recommendation that's negative, actually.
Interesting.
And let's see if this is really what God wants me to do. And I sent that one, and I not only sent that one letter that they prepared, but I made a copy that I keep to this day to remember who I was, or who I am actually, and who God can bring me to be, right? Yeah. And also to remember myself and to remember other people that the opinion that people may have about you, not necessarily they need to determine who exactly you're becoming, right? Or your condition does not need to determine who you're becoming. So if you're coming from an environment or a family that was a happy family, there's a documentary, Happy Shiny People, something like that, talking about a family that's here in the States. There was a Christian family, famous on television, etc. But they are not exactly as good as they would show on the screen. It's the same thing with my story. Looking back at that time, I can think that I can have a family that's actually happy, right? I can be different. I can be different to other people compared to what my leaders there and the boarding school, they were thinking about me, and I'm still in the process. I'm still trying.
So you sort of have this turning point, motivational moment where you're gonna become a new person. You go to university. I'm just going to kind of take people through some of your stops here. You end up graduating. You get hired by your academy alma mater, and you work there doing communication. You end up working at your university that you graduated from in the marketing department. You went on to work at the West Sao Paulo Conference in communication. Eventually, you were hired by the Adventist Church's Hope Channel in Brazil called Novo Tempo, which is huge. I don't think most Americans understand how big it is. What is the scale? What kind of operation is Novo Tempo?
Yeah, so Novo Tempo is the media center that the church has there in South America, different than what the Adventist Church has here in the United States, where we have different ministries spread across the country, and the funding is spread, etc. There in South America, the church has everything in one organization, which is Novo Tempo. Basically, the free translation would be New Time, the Hope Channel. So there's the New Time, the Hope Channel, and so Voice of Prophecy. It's written. Everything is within that organization, right? The record label, the radio network. In Brazil, we have, I believe, 17 radio stations. I led one in the conference that I was communication director for a while. Television, everything. The Bible school. They have like 1 million people probably more at this time, that request Bible studies from the church. There, everything is in one organization. They probably have at this time, when I left, it's almost 10 years ago, over 500 employees. At this time, they certainly have more than 700 in this one organization, which is in São Paulo, near the international airport. For those who had the opportunity to fly to São Paulo, it's 45 minutes from there. And I had the opportunity to serve in that organization for 4 years.
And eventually you rise to the level of director of television there, which is a big responsibility. Mm-hmm. Your career is on a great trajectory. You got asked to work at a couple of general conference sessions over those years. You told me that most people generally don't leave denominational employment once they're in it. It's a pretty good gig for people. So it's natural that you could just ride this momentum all the way to the top level of the Adventist World Church. So what changed?
Well, I had the opportunity to... So there's an author, I believe it's Mark Twain, that says that travel is the antidote. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. Antidote to bigotry. So if you want to get rid of all your mistaken thoughts about other people, other places, etc., you need to travel. So travel was something that always triggered in me the desire to know more, to see more, especially in terms of people. So working for the media center there in Brazil, I was in charge of the television. The television covers the 8 countries in the South America division. I had to travel a lot to some of those places that we travel now, right? So with Maranatha, Peru, Ecuador, Chile, Argentina. We have not been to Argentina with Maranatha, but at the time I would travel there frequently. Bolivia, Paraguay, they don't have a media center there, but now we were working there. Going to those places, I always saw, something that was new, in terms of ideas, in terms of the landscape, in terms of the people, the stories, the culture, and everything. And then, of course, all the opportunities that I had to travel to different places, Europe, here in the United States, etc. At that time, I was not traveling. My work was not ever relating me to Africa, where I serve now, or Asia, India, etc. But traveling was something that triggered me. I want to know more, and travel makes the globe much smaller. And so I decided at some point that, well, I can stay here in this part of the globe that God chose me for me to be born, or I can explore more, right? And for that, I need the language. Of course, I need more cultural knowledge about other realities, etc. And so after almost 12 years serving the church there in South America, I decided to pause for a while just to come to Andrews University to prepare myself, going to the seminary, working on my MDiv, the master's program, the standard program that we have here in the States for pastors and for ministers. And I came to work on that, and that's when I decided to leave the television, and that's the reason. I didn't have plans at that time what's happening next. You're right that usually in my culture in South America, people have lots of respect for church leaders, for the organization, and of course I also have, and still to this day, of course, much respect for that. And so it's really hard to leave, when you are in a system that's working fine, in something that's growing, etc. But I decided that I didn't want in the future to look back and see that I was not growing in different aspects. And that was the main decision at that time to leave the work that I was doing as in communication, as a journalist, and come to the United States.
Do people wonder why you were doing that? I mean, was there a lot of questions like, hey, why are you leaving this good thing that you have?
Yeah, because you people think at that time, of course, I had just one son. When we left Brazil, he was 1 year old, and now we have two more. So you have your family. I was married for at that time almost 10 years. So I had children at that time. I had at least one son, and I had a good job. With a good job, you have a decent, way to keep your family, right, and to keep moving with the possibility of growing more, etc., etc. So yeah, people question why leave the certainty behind to deal with doubt, right? Of course, I came initially to Andrews with no sponsorship, so people knew that I was, paying out of pocket. I was not supported by the church and my decision to come in terms of the finances, etc. So yes, I had to spend the money they didn't have. Later, I got support, from the university there in Brazil, which I'm very, very grateful for the years that I was at Andrews. For 1 year, I was supported by the church there in South America, and through the whole time, people that like me, that know me, they're probably questioning, I remember, my president at Novo Tempo, when he came to visit the Maranatha convention in 2018, and he was asking me, he was here in Sacramento, and he was asking me, at that time I was still a student, I was not working here for Maranatha, I was still as a student, I was explaining to him how costly it is, right? You coming from a different economy, Brazil, now the exchange rate is even worse, but at the time it was probably 4-1, 5-1. I was explaining how much in dollars, US dollars, I was spending, so he was just calculating that in Brazilian reais, which is our currency there, and I would say, Lisandro, you're crazy, to do that, to leave the certainty of having a salary every month to come as a student and try to keep your family just to be able to grow and to learn something. At the same time, he was saying that in a way that, for me, I think he was positive about me making that change, because he knew that I was really achieving the goals that I had for me, for my family, for my spiritual life, for my professional life, etc.
So when did you first learn about Maranatha, and what did you know about Maranatha in the beginning?
Yeah, that's very interesting. So in 2010, I came to work with the media team at the GC session in Atlanta. I was invited by the communication department at that time. Pastor Ray Dabrowski was the director of communication, and Pastor Williams Costa Jr., he's also from Brazil. He knew me. He was one of the assistants, and he invited me. At that time, I had the opportunity to work with one of the colleagues that I have here, David Brillhart, for instance. At that time, he was probably not working for Maranatha. I didn't know much about Maranatha, but one thing I remember about that year and about GC session was that going to the exhibit hall, there was a church, a one-day church. The full structure was there, and that, I remember that was I had two memories, and recently I mentioned that I have two memories from that GC session. Now almost 15 years ago. Was the Maranatha, the one-day church that we had there, that would catch my attention, and the Andrews University booth. So it's somehow, years later, I was connected to both organizations, and that's what I have in my mind. God was probably... So
you're saying marketing works, basically.
Definitely works. And I was even a great promoter of the idea of having a one-day church structure, or one of the metal structures that we have here in different places that we go. We did that recently there in Brazil, even having a half of a church structure there, and that's just based on my own experience. I mean, I was impacted by that. It was the first time, and then years later, at the time when I had that first in 2010, when I actually heard about Maranatha, it's possible that I heard about Maranatha before without even connecting the dots, right? Being there in Brazil, etc. But then in 2014, not too long before I actually left, coming here to the States, then Maranatha came to Brazil. with the intention of bringing our TV show, Maranatha Mission Stories, to Brazil as Maranatha Histórias de Missão. And as I was in charge of the television, I was part of all the meetings and all the process to facilitate that. So that was the moment when I actually knew more about Maranatha, from the inside, right? Getting to know the people who are part of the team at that time, leadership or management here. They were there for different times to discuss the possibility of having a TV show there. And the TV show, we started airing the TV show there in Brazil, in Portuguese, the last year that I was there. So that was my connection with Maranatha initially.
So you go on to graduate from Andrews University, you have your Master's of Divinity, and you are, go ahead.
Yeah, and actually, Maranatha invited me as I was still working on that.
Yes.
So I left 4 classes behind that I have plans to finish next year. So with the grace of God, I will, go
graduate
back to get that
soon.
To get the MBA.
Yes. Okay. I kind of gave you an honorary degree, so I thought you'd finish that.
I'm happy that. We actually have a doctor, from at least one from Andrews University here, or President Don Novo just received the honorary degree. From
he
Andrews.
did last year.
Yeah, I'm
That's
happy
right.
for him.
Kind of a lifetime achievement.
Yeah.
So you do come to work at Maranatha. Talk a little bit about your current role as Vice President of Volunteers. What do you do for Maranatha?
Yeah, so coming to work for Maranatha, as now you understand based on the story that I'm telling here, it was mostly everything was new. Of course, everything that we do with the church, I knew from the other side, working for the church, understanding the church in many parts of the globe. But I didn't know exactly how Maranatha operated. And again, as I mentioned initially, volunteering, especially overseas, is not inherently part of our culture there in South America. We are developing that, right? So it was a long process of learning, right, to get to this point. And I'm still beginning, right? But so at Andrews, Maranatha invited me right when I came from Brazil. They invited me to help initially with communication, and then I was invited later in 2018 to come to fill a position that we had David Lopez for, I believe, 13 years, as a director of volunteer services, and he left to work for Walla Walla University, and they invited me to come. And then it was a process of learning from everybody. Still learning today, of course, but learning how to create a deep experience from the spiritual aspect, also physical aspect, and the logical aspect of going to other places and learning about different cultures, etc. for volunteers. Right? Every year, in average, Maranatha takes 2,000 volunteers, to the field here in North America, but also all the countries that we work. And I am in this process of learning more and more how, to provide to volunteers the best possible mission experience.
Well, as you're gaining more and more experience, what is your goal for volunteers? How is it evolving? What is your goal and wish for volunteers when they volunteer with Maranatha?
Yeah, one thing that I have learned and I have experienced that, leaving the comfort of your home to serve, overseas or even here, close to home, it opens, a window of, knowledge and perception about how the reality really is for many people, and how God moves in the world, how God intervenes or how he does not intervene in certain things, etc. My personal perspective for volunteers is that each volunteer, regardless of their age, they can have also that moment, that experience where they can realize that the reality is, the horizon that they see here home is very limited compared to the reality of most people. But also that they do that from the spiritual perspective that God is working now, as the promise that we find in Revelation, to make all things new. So that's that's my personal goal for volunteers, that they realize that we are part of this plan. We're joining God's mission, right? And He's starting this process of making all things new before we get to heaven with the things that we can do here. But He's also going to fix, the problems that we have, forever at some point, and we are part of this process. That's the goal that I personally have for volunteers. But of course, there are many technical things that you need to do to keep volunteers safe, to keep volunteers happy with the work that they are doing, realized with everything that they are able to provide for different communities in different places, etc. So there's lots of work that is not just the philosophy that we need to do and accomplish here in the office with the whole team that we have here, plus the field staff. You were able to talk here recently with the field staff responsible for volunteer services, some of them, right?
Yes.
In some of the countries that we work. And they are the ones doing the magic of making the experience become real in the life of our volunteers. But we are here in the office planning and working with volunteers, leaders, our management, and our field staff to facilitate those experiences to happen.
I love what you said about coming alongside God's mission and what He's already doing. I think a lot of times maybe a criticism of mission trips is that, we're just coming in, we're bringing God to these people. Well, really, you're just coming alongside what God is already doing. You're partnering with the local communities and joining in with what God's doing. Yeah,
you mentioned something that's interesting because, I would say for the last 10 years, especially, schools that are either managing schools in the college level, especially, or universities that are managing mission trips, etc. There's lots of discussions about short-term missions, its efficacy, how efficient it is, and the way. And those discussions are important because in reality, there are many people doing things that are not bringing a long-term help, to many places. But I'm always concerned that some of those discussions they also become discouraging for people to serve, because then you start focusing on the possible negatives, which from the perspective of what we do here at Maranatha, I'm more equipped to answer the objections that people make about short-term missions. But I'm a little concerned about people getting discouraged about short-term missions, and it's important to talk about the benefits of short-term missions, right? And one is exactly what I said, is we're joining God's mission. He's already at work in different places. He's moving there, especially for the work that we do with Maranatha. Yes, we are providing buildings that will facilitate the gospel to get to more people. But we are only building buildings there because some people know about God already. They know about Jesus. They know that God is making all things new, right? And we provide the infrastructure for them to be able to tell more people. So we definitely go to places to join what God is already doing there. And that's the first thing that's important. We come to places, the work that we do here, right, for the organization. We go to recently I visited a country in South America, Paraguay, right, where we're starting to work. We recently had a project before our first project there after, I believe, 20 years. And before this project, I went there to visit. The first thing is to pay attention to what God is doing already, right? Okay, God is moving here and He's making this thing happen. Maybe you can join them and can provide something that they need here. Well, this is how God is moving this different community here. But maybe that's what they need. We can help them with that. And that's one thing that brings me joy of serving Maranatha, because I believe that Maranatha, of course, after 55 years, and everyone here has learned a lot. I am the one that's, more recently joining a team of people that are serving for 40 years, 30 years, 20-something years. And throughout this time, or 50-something years, we are learning, with God, with people around the globe, how to do things better, how to do the right thing. And it brings me really joy to know that Maranatha is very intentional about joining the movements that God has already started in different places.
Absolutely. So I was curious, you worked for the church for a long time. Now you're working for a mission organization that works with the church. What did you take from your time serving in the Adventist church that is helping you in your role with Maranatha?
Well, one thing, recently I had a conversation about that. Not necessarily that's the most important thing, but one thing that I mentioned recently that came to my mind immediately to my team here in the office, and we had a team that's working more recently here, so I'll share in my perspective. One thing is the care that we should have with the money that we manage, the resources that we manage. That's something that I learned working for the church in the organizations that I worked. My philosophy working for the church was always like, if I have $10 to spend in something that I need to do, somebody had to work and to make $100 for me to be able to spend $10 here for the church, right? And that's something that taught me. I had leaders that inspired me in this process, right? Not everybody has the privilege of having good leaders, but I had the best possible leaders that had this perspective, in every place where I worked for the church. Very careful with resources, right? So that's the same thing that I try to apply here. And then the other thing that I can think about is about my relationship with the church is, of course, in this understanding the people that we're helping. Because I had the opportunity, for instance, to work for a conference. That's the level of the church that's closer to the local churches and the people. I would say that was probably the time of my life that I cannot say happy, but I was really, really. It was the same feeling that I have now working with Maranatha, because I was closer to the people. And when I could have one-on-one conversations with church members, etc. I was never a church pastor, a local pastor, etc. But working for the conference, I had this opportunity, right? So filming stories, preaching in different churches, etc. When you work in different levels, then you're talking to many people. In the case for the television there in Brazil, for millions of people at the same time. But you don't know who is there on the other side of the screen. When you're working with people, as we can do now, serving Maranatha and working for the conference, you learn more about how they think about what we do, how they think about what they need, how they think about who God is, how they think about the reality, etc. And I try to bring the same thing to the work that I do here, so understand the local communities where we work. Especially for me, coming from South America, it's a special moment when I have the opportunity to work in South America, understanding a little bit more. Although, of course, Peru is completely different culture than Brazil and completely different than Argentina or other places. But because I feel at home, I know, and culture is something beautiful. God communicates through culture, and He uses the different cultures, and He's not extinguishing cultures. We see the vision that John has there in Revelation, people from different tribes and tongues, etc. And I think God, that's the beauty of what God does, and inviting us to be part of this process.
What would you say that you have learned about God working for a missions organization that you didn't get until you came to Maranatha? You're working for God in the church, so you're around religious people. You're learning about God as you go through seminary. What did you not learn until you actually were working at Maranatha and out in the mission field?
Yeah, I would say that's not learning, but it's basically shaping or adjusting your framework in terms of theology. I think that the experiences that I have had in different places where we work, those experiences have helped me to shape or to tune my theology, my personal theology, right? Of course, certainly we were talking here, and you may have a different perspective than me, and our viewers may have a different perspective, etc. But I think it's really important to understand the reality of the great controversy. That's a great contribution that Adventism gives to Christianity. There's the framework of the great controversy, this battle of good and evil, etc., and how that translates to the reality of life that we have in this world, right? So that's something that working for Maranatha has helped me to fine-tune my understanding of how the great controversy translates to our everyday life in different places, and how God interacts with that, or how much God intervenes or does not intervene, the reasons for that, and so on and so forth. I think this is the main thing in terms of personal worldview, right? It has helped me to fine-tune, my understanding of God, my understanding of the way He works and He acts, around us. But then there are other things about, in practical terms, about understanding reality, from a practical perspective, in terms of, how good decisions or bad decisions, they affect everybody's life, and how, politics or anything that is around us, it's outside the spiritual realm, also affects life. And having the opportunity to travel, it gives you many opportunities to pay attention. I don't think that everybody who travels actually pays attention to everything, but thankfully that's something that I have developed, to go to places and pay attention to what exactly is happening there and why, and the issues that people have, etc. That's one of the things that I'm more passionate about the work that we do.
Maranatha's work is, in the mission statement, it's spreading the gospel, right, through construction, basically building people up. How do volunteers actually spread the gospel on a Maranatha mission trip?
Yeah, one vision that I have, one thing that comes to my mind every time that I see volunteers going to serve. I don't have the opportunity to go to every volunteer project. We had in 2024 53 volunteer projects. We had 61, I believe, last year. I can go to a few every year. But the one thing that I think when I think about volunteers going to different places is the text of Habakkuk 2 verse 14, that the knowledge of the glory of God, will be, will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. I think that even if we consider places where the gospel is known already, right? So we go to South America, we go to Brazil. Brazil is a majorly Christian country, right? It's the same thing here in the States, the same thing, in other places. So people know about God, they know about something about Jesus, but when volunteers go and serve, when they decided to leave the comfort of their place, their air conditioning at home, a comfortable vehicle that they drive to their jobs. When they leave their job behind, they are not making money, but instead they are spending money to go to a different location, to sleep in a not as comfortable bed, or to sleep in a tent, or to sleep in anywhere that we can provide as we organize, and they serve. I believe what they are doing, that's a statement about the glory of God. And I believe that people have the perception of who God is and how He, because that's what He did, right? Sending Jesus, right? Jesus was the first missionary in to come and to join and to be part of something. When we have the opportunity to go to different countries and have, just little bits of experiences that are similar to the daily life that those people have there, and you're serving and working hard to leave something that's tangible, a building there behind, I think people, they have a view of the glory of God. Maybe just a small glimpse of the glory of God, but at least, each volunteer going in different places, the glory of God. And any missionary, any voluntary going with any organization, they help to do that, to spread the knowledge of the glory of God, as the prophet says.
What would you say you admire most about Maranatha volunteers?
Is precisely what I said that is not part of my culture, right? So I came from. I understand that the United States was also colonized, for a number of years or centuries, and Brazil was under colonization for 300 years. But I see in other parts of the globe, and I talk about my country. I'm not talking about other cultures, etc. That there's this tension between, I want to do something good, but what I'm getting out of that, right? And okay, I serve, but who is paying my bills? Okay, I want to give something, but how, I'm not paying my way to get to this place to serve, etc. And that's the culture that you need to change. You need to impact that culture. But when I work with volunteers, and of course they come from different places. I have being with volunteers in the field from Europe, from my home country, from other places in South America, mostly from the United States and Canada. I see people that, they really, really care about serving. They will invest whatever they have. There's a misconception. Some people think, well, serving in short-term missions, or even long-term missions, that's something for people who have money. They don't have anything else to do. That's not true. I know our volunteers. I know that they do have a job. They have business. They have things that they leave behind. They have bills that are left, unpaid before they come back to be able to pay, to go and to serve. I'm always humbled by volunteers who invest their time, resources, their knowledge, their life, our first Adventist missionary, John Andrews, that gives name to our university, Andrews University. He talks about this mission is so how's the wording that he uses? But basically, the mission is so important that we spend and be spent, because that's exactly what volunteers are doing, right? Some younger volunteers are spending the most active years or time of their life when they go during their vacation time, their time off, etc., to serve. They also take their resources, so they're taking their money, their resources, they're spending, and they are being spent in the process because they're using their energy, they're using their body to leave something behind for people that they don't even know. I use in many projects that I go, I mention a quote that says that a society grows great when old people plant trees in whose shade they know they shall never sit. I mention that every time, and I even get emotional thinking about that, because that's the story of many volunteers. They go to places to plant trees. They know that under those shades they shall never sit, because they are never coming back to those churches, to those schools. In rare cases, we have volunteers going back to the same location. They don't even know. And those places are multiplying and multiplying and growing and growing and growing. And one day in heaven, if our hope is right, then they will know their impact.
That's beautiful. And we get to see that at Maranatha, right? Like 10 years down the line, we'll come back to a country, and all of a sudden this church that these volunteers built 10, 15 years ago has sprouted a few other daughter congregations, and now they need a church, and the cycle kind of repeats itself. That's a really great line. I'm paraphrasing, but spend and be spent. Wow. That's really great. So you got to lead a mission trip in your home country of Brazil recently, near the beach city of Recife. What was it like leading a project in your home country? Yeah,
that's interesting, and that's a good question. And that was a good experience. It was a great experience. Maranatha had been to Brazil with volunteers, because we're continuously working in Brazil. I would say for close to 15 years probably. But since 2019, we had not had volunteers serving in Brazil, although we drew water wells, etc. So over 5 years later, we decided it was time, for us to go back, and we were able to identify a church near Recife in the northeast of Brazil. Brazil is a continental country as the United States, so you fly several hours, from São Paulo to Recife, of course to the Amazon. People think about the Amazon, so it's a big country, and so we were working in the Northeast mainly, for most of the time that we were working there, in the same area. we identified this church, Serraria. I believe you had the opportunity to visit this same location. It was a small group of members. They were meeting in different places. I think they had to move to 6 different places in recent years, renting and just being able to use a community center and things like that without having a church building. They were able to, with lots of effort front end, to build a piece of land there. They paid something close to $4,000 in current numbers. And then Maranatha came to help, right, to provide this church. And then, of course, going back to Brazil, I thought, okay, that's an opportunity for me as well, not only to go to Brazil, but to be able to provide more, right, for volunteers, etc., and to provide this interaction with the local church and local leadership, etc. And it was a great opportunity. It was a small group. We were planning another one for next year. So if you want to join in October next year, we are going to have another project in the same area. A beautiful area of the country, lots of needs. It's a big city, and you're working outside for 45 minutes from Recife.
By the way, you're saying the city name wrong, and I'm saying it right? You're saying it for the English audience.
Exactly. I'm trying to. Recife is more like we. And basically means.
Just wanted to point out that I was right, you were wrong.
You were right.
Yeah.
And I was going to say that you're doing very well.
But it's with an R, so in Portuguese there's no.
So Recife is the name of the capital city. Basically means coral reef, right? That's the meaning.
Did you have any moment when you're leading a project? You're just so busy, I'm sure. But did you have any moment where you're like, "Wow, I'm back in Brazil"? Of course, not where you lived or worked before necessarily, but doing completely different work than I.
Yeah, I think the first Sabbath we were there. We just had the concrete slab and the metal structure, right, that you use, to build the block walls around. And the first Sabbath, I had the realization in my mind that the last time I had been to Recife was still working for the television when we were dedicating the channel there, because the Hope channel in Brazil is free to air in most of the country, and also is present there in that capital city. Recife is the capital city for the state of Pernambuco, right? So I was there, I believe it was 2014, when channel 27 was dedicated, right? I was there representing the television with my president, etc. And then I come back 10 years later, mainly to build a building that's going to be the place of worship, most likely for some of the people that were reached by the TV channel that we dedicated 10 years before. Most likely. I didn't have the opportunity to have those talks with church members to understand. I had conversations with them, and I understood that some of those church members, they came recently to the church. And I can bet, I can put some money on that some of those, they learned about the church because of the TV channel. And that's the influence that...
Well, I know they're still watching because I saw them watching in one of their homes when I was visiting. So,
and that's true.
Yes,
that's true. The television has a huge influence. It's among the top. I would say, I'm guessing here. So Brazilian friends, you
don't hold it against him here.
You pardon me if I'm mistaken, but I would say among the 30 or 50 largest channels in terms of viewership in Brazil, etc. Across the board in terms of pay TV or free to air, etc. So people really watch it, and I believe that as we were building the church there, we were helping the people who were reached by the television, which was part of my job, before working, and. Everything else, I didn't know the church leadership for the conference there, but because you're in your home country, the language, the culture, everything, flows easily, very easily. And I believe that I had the opportunity, during the time that you were there, for 10 days with volunteers, around me to share, some aspects of the culture, the language, how the church works there, and many aspects about Brazil. I was really glad to take volunteers to Brazil again.
Another project that you've led last couple of years is our trip for high schoolers, Ultimate Workout.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, you kind of referenced it earlier about seeing some of the kids that come on those trips and maybe are dealing with lots of things at their home coming on this mission trip. Do you see yourself in any of those kids on Ultimate
No
Workout?
doubt. That's one of the reasons why, as challenging as leading that project can be, is one of the things that when I come back, I think, how can I not be part of that next year, right? And I believe that's the same feeling that other volunteers have, that help us to, they have a large leadership group that help us to lead that group. We probably, at Maranatha, if you consider a year like 2024, between 20 and 25% of the universe of volunteers that have served, they are under 18 years old, right? Probably 25%. Under 18 years old. And I have a special, with all due respect for everybody else in all ages, I have a special care personally, about that group. And that's one of the reasons why I like to be part of Ultimate Workout. I was introduced to Ultimate Workout at the very beginning of my journey with Maranatha in 2016. And the experiences that I have seen happening in that project are amazing. So I serve thinking that I can be serving a kid that's just like myself, as a trouble kid. That's one thing that I talk to other leaders. When there's this, when it starts the conversation, we're labeling kids. Eventually that happens, right? This or that way. And if by any chance we start calling someone internally or something, as a trouble kid, I have said that, in front of other people, that that really makes me uncomfortable, because that could easily describe myself, in the past, and maybe even today. For God, it's probably how he would describe myself, right? I don't like this idea of labeling kids as trouble kids, etc. And I believe that those kids that we could possibly describe them as a trouble kids, they are precisely the ones for whom we have the project, right? Because they are the ones that need the most. And they may be like me, coming from very challenging circumstances in their place that we don't even know about. And their behavior is just reflecting that, in the same way as my behavior was reflecting that when I was in the academy there in Brazil. So I have lots of interest for that. I can tell you one story if we had time for that, because that's the story that I use as an example of what I would like to see happening every year, not only with teenagers, but with any volunteer, right? So a few years ago, some members of our management here in the office, they were having a meeting with somebody. It was a business meeting, unrelated to the mission, but related, because everything that we do, if we're talking about money, is related to the mission that we do, etc. But it was not about projects. Projects came up in that conversation with this lady, and they were explaining, I believe Kenneth, Susan, Bushnell were part of that conversation, so they were explaining the different kinds of projects that we have. And they mentioned that we have projects for families, we have projects for different groups, for young adults, etc. We have projects for teenagers only, Ultimate Workout. And this lady, that caught her attention. I was thinking, so you have mission trips for teenagers only? Yes, that's something that we do every year. She said, well, I do have a teenager at home that I believe she needs something like that. And we were like two weeks before the project.
And this lady was not Seventh-day Adventist.
Not related to the church. That's what I said. It was a business meeting in a completely different context and environment, completely unrelated to the church. And she said that. She said, well, we don't, of course, many people, they may describe themselves as Christians, but they don't go to church, etc., right? And so she said, well, I have my daughter. I believe she would benefit in doing that. She has her challenges, of course, and we have challenges with her. But it was 2 weeks before the project. Of course, the deadlines were gone at that time, etc. But they said, no, if she's willing to, we can have her. A couple of weeks later, this girl was landing in Nairobi, Kenya. And I remember, I was there. I remember her, she was sporting her headphones and she was disconnected. She was in Kenya, but her mind was somewhere in the west coast of the United States, right? So, or anywhere else, probably, I don't know what exactly. She was listening on her phone, etc. She was not there, or not. She was somewhere else. And as the project progressed, as she was working, I remember one morning we were working for walking early in the morning, I believe 6:30 in the morning, something like that, for worship. And you're playing a song to invite kids to come for worship, etc. And she looked at me,
upbeat, energetic.
Exactly. And she's, what is that? This is great. What are you doing? And and as the project was progressing, and she saw that group of people, 120 people serving, doctors, nurses, kids, and leaders, laying blocks to build dormitories, to build a classroom. Something was changing in her mind, in her heart. By Thursday, Pastor Brandon Westgate, he was the speaker for Ultimate Workout for many years, and I hope he can come back. He made an invitation for baptism. And this girl was there. And I was thinking, now I have a problem, right? Because we are a church that we're very organized, we have a process for that, etc. This girl's not even coming from any church. She had no church to go to after the project. So of course we have those conversations. We take things seriously. We had conversations with the leadership team, etc. And we called family. Said this is what she's saying. She wants to publicly tell everybody that she wants to follow Jesus, right? That's what she wants to do. And the family was okay with that. And Sabbath afternoon, we had a baptism for 26 people were baptized during that baptism. And she was one of them. And I remember Pastor Brandon, I was holding the microphone, and Pastor Brandon was asking who'd like to say something before being baptized, right? And she was one of the volunteers who said, I would like to share. And she was probably 14, 15 years old. And she said, before coming to this trip here, I had no idea. I had never heard about Adventism before. That's what she said. And her decision of being baptized there, the translation of that, in my perspective, in my reading of that story, was that whoever these people believe, whoever they are, whatever they are going to, whatever they are following, whoever they are following, I want to be one of them. And that's my desire for every volunteer. No matter how much time we have in church, I was born in a Seventh-day Adventist family. My grandparents were Adventists. Many people who serve with us, they have the same experience. My desire is that every volunteer going to a Maranatha project, they may have the feeling, I just want to keep following this Jesus. I just want to keep going the same direction. I want this girl, I cannot tell her name, of course, to preserve the story here. I want this girl to have in her mind this memory. Whatever she's deciding to do with her life after she came back, right? Whatever. I don't know if she was showing up for Sabbath school the next Sabbath morning. Probably not, to be honest. I want her, every major decision she needs to make, that she may think, one day, I met people who were following Jesus, and that's what I want to do. That's my desire for every volunteer. That's my desire.
Beautiful. I think we should just end there. Lisandro, thank you so much for sharing some of your journey, for all that you do for Maranatha, and for the impact that you've made on so many volunteers. And thanks again for being here today.
That's my pleasure. It was a great pleasure to serve Maranatha and to be here.